My mother actually hurled a slice of cake at me when I refused to hand over my brand new apartment to my pregnant sister. So I fought back by forcing the sale of the house we co-owned, evicting my entire family from the only home they'd ever known and proving I wasn't their personal ATM anymore. I'm 28 years old, and this whole mess started recently, but the backstory goes back about 7 years. That's when my grandmother passed away. She was a good woman, and I still miss her. In her will, she left her house to me and my younger sister, Addison. Addison's 25 now. The will was simple. We each owned 50% of the house, no strings attached. When Grandma died, I was 21 and still in college, working on my degree. Addison was 18, just finishing high school. Our mom, Erica, had been living with Grandma, taking care of her during her last few years. After Grandma passed, Mom just stayed in the house. Addison stayed too, of course. It made sense. At the time, I was living in student housing, then a series of small rental places after I graduated and got a job. I didn't need the space at Grandma's house. The arrangement was simple. Mom and Addison would stay there without paying me any rent, but they'd cover all the bills, property taxes, utilities, and general upkeep. It seemed fair, and I thought I was helping them out. My dad wasn't really in the picture. He left when I was a kid, so Mom raised me and Addison on her own. I always thought we had a decent relationship. Not super close, but okay. I never saw this coming. After I graduated at 22, I got a job and set a big goal for myself by my own place. For 6 years, I worked my ass off. I took every overtime shift I could get, skipped vacations, didn't buy new cars or gadgets. My car's old, but it runs. My clothes are basic, but fine. I pack my lunch every day. Every spare dollar went into my savings account. Friends would invite me out or plan trips, and I usually had to say no. It wasn't always easy, but I kept picturing the day I'd finally have a place of my own. Earlier this year, that day finally came. I had saved enough for a down payment on a 2-bedroom apartment. It cost $200,000, not fancy, but in a decent area, safe and clean. It also cut my work commute way down. The day I signed the papers was one of the best days of my life. For the first month, I painted the walls myself and bought some basic furniture, a bed, a sofa, a small table and chairs. It took weeks to get everything set up, but 8 weeks ago I finally moved in. For the first time ever, I had a place that was 100% mine, something I'd earned on my own. That's when things took a turn. My mom and sister have always had a weird attitude about my money. It's like they think because I'm single and working, they're entitled to a piece of it, or at least some say in how I spend it. Whenever I mention a work bonus, my mom would immediately suggest something I could buy for the house, meaning Grandma's house where they lived. Once it was a new washing machine they needed. I pointed out that they were living there and upkeep was their responsibility, but she made me feel guilty, saying the old one was a pain. I ended up giving her half the money for it. Addison was the same. Even after she got a part-time job at a local store, she'd still ask me for money. Can you lend me $50? My paycheck's late, or my phone bill's higher than I thought. Can you help? It wasn't huge amounts, but it was constant. Her reasoning was always the same. I earned more than her, and I didn't have kids or a partner to support. I usually gave in just to keep the peace. Then, about 2 years ago, Addison started dating Walt. He's 26. A year into their relationship, he moved into Grandma's house with Mom and Addison. I wasn't thrilled. I'd met Walt a few times. He seemed okay, but he never seemed to have a real job. He'd talk about finding the right opportunity or doing gig work, but mostly he just hung around the house. Once Walt moved in, the requests for money got more frequent. My mom would call, saying the electric bill was outrageous or that a pipe had burst. I started pushing back, saying, there are 3 adults living there now. You guys need to handle it. That usually led to her making me feel like I was being selfish or ungrateful. A few months ago, right in the middle of me buying my apartment, Addison announced she was pregnant. Mom was over the moon about becoming a grandmother. I congratulated Addison. It was big news. We didn't talk about her living situation changing. I just assumed she and Walt would either stay at Grandma's or eventually get their own place, like most couples do when they start a family. No one said anything to suggest otherwise. Then, about a month after I moved into my new apartment, my mom called. She said we needed to have a family meeting and that it was really important. She asked me to come over to Grandma's house. I figured it was about the baby, maybe planning a shower or talking about names. I drove over that afternoon. When I walked into the living room, my mom, Addison, and Walt were all sitting there, looking serious. There was a chocolate cake on the coffee table. I remember thinking it was odd. Why the cake? My mom started with a long speech about how families are supposed to support each other and how everyone has to make sacrifices for the greater good. Then, she started talking about Addison and the baby, how Addison was pregnant and vulnerable, how Walt was really trying to find a good, stable job, but the economy was tough. Addison sat there staring at her lap, looking miserable. Walt was just staring at the floor, not saying a word. Then my mom just came out with it. She said that since I was single and had this new 2-bedroom apartment all to myself, and Addison and Walt were about to start a family and desperately needed a stable, nice place for the baby, the obvious and fair solution was for me to give my apartment to Addison and Walt. She didn't ask. She said it like it was the only logical thing to do. She said I could move into the spare bedroom at Grandma's house. She even smiled like she had just solved a huge problem I didn't even know existed. She said it was my family duty and the Christian thing to do, even though we weren't particularly religious. I was absolutely stunned. I think my jaw literally hit the floor. I just stared at her, trying to wrap my head around what she just said. Give them my apartment? The one I just bought? The one I'd worked 6 years to afford? She kept going, saying I didn't really need all that space for just one person. Addison, she said, deserved a fresh start in a clean, new place for her first baby. She went on and on about how perfect my apartment would be for them. New appliances, freshly painted. Then she said it would be so much easier for her to help Addison with the baby if Addison was living in my apartment because it was so much nicer than Grandma's old house. When I finally found my voice, I told her firmly and calmly, no, I said, that's not happening. I worked for 6 years to save up for that apartment. It's mine. I bought it with my money, and I'm not giving it to anyone. I said Addison and Walt could stay in Grandma's house, which was perfectly fine and had plenty of space, or they could find their own apartment like every other young couple starting a family. The change in my mom was instant. It was like a switch flipped. Her face got red, her eyes narrowed, and her voice went from sweet and reasonable to loud and furious. She started yelling that I was being selfish and ungrateful. She claimed they'd allowed me to benefit from Grandma's house all these years by not charging me for upkeep or forcing me to sell my share earlier. That was a complete rewrite of history. I co-owned the house, and they were living there completely rent-free. Addison burst into big, dramatic sobs, saying, I can't believe you don't care about me or my baby. How can you be so cruel? Walt finally looked up and mumbled, yeah, man. I thought you were better than this. This is low. The argument escalated. I kept my voice even but firm. I repeated, my apartment is not an option. It's not up for discussion. My mom got more and more agitated. She started pacing the room, then stormed over to the coffee table, grabbed a big slice of chocolate cake with her bare hand, and hurled it at me. It hit me square in the chest, splattering up into my face and hair. She was screaming at this point, full-on screaming, that I was a disgrace, a terrible son, and how could I put my own selfish desires above my pregnant sister and her unborn child? Addison was wailing. Walt just stood there looking shocked, but still nodding along with my mother. I didn't shout back. I just took a napkin, wiped the cake off my face and shirt, and said, this conversation is over. Then I walked to the door. All three of them were yelling at me. My mother shouted that I'd regret this for the rest of my life, that if I left without agreeing, I wasn't her son anymore. Addison sobbed that I was going to cause her to miscarry from all the stress. I just walked out and closed the door behind me. I drove back to my apartment, the smell of chocolate cake still on me. At first, I felt numb. Then the anger hit. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First my mom, then Addison. I let go to voicemail. The messages were more of the same. The next week was a nightmare. My phone blew up nonstop. My mom sent long, rambling texts, pages of them, accusing me of tearing the family apart, of being selfish, of owing it to Addison. She listed every sacrifice she'd ever made for me as a kid. Addison's texts were shorter, but way more emotional. You're going to make me lose this baby. I hope you're happy. She even sent a picture of an ultrasound with the message, this is who you're hurting. Then the extended family got involved. My mom must have called everyone she knew. My aunts, my cousins, even people I hadn't spoken to in years started reaching out. They all had the same story, clearly fed to them by my mother, that I was being incredibly selfish and refusing to help my poor, pregnant sister. One aunt said I needed to do the right thing and honor my mother. Another accused me of abandoning my family responsibilities. I tried explaining the actual situation to the first aunt who called, but she just talked over me, saying, family comes first. After that, I gave up. I sent one group text to my mom, Addison, and Walt. I wrote, my decision about my apartment is final. It's not yours, and I will not be giving it to you. Your behavior during that meeting, especially mom throwing cake at me, and the constant harassment since is completely unacceptable. Do not contact me about the apartment again. That didn't stop them. If anything, it made them angrier. The messages kept coming, so I started blocking numbers. First my mom, then Addison, then the aunts. I wasn't sleeping. I was constantly on edge. It became clear that they genuinely believed they were entitled to my apartment, and that I was the villain for saying no. There was zero recognition of my side, my hard work, my rights, or the fact that they were living rent-free in a house I co-owned. It's been about 4 weeks since the cake-throwing fiasco. The harassment, the calls, the texts, it's been relentless, right up until I started blocking people. There's been no apology, no attempt at resolution. If anything, they're more convinced than ever that I'm the bad guy. I haven't spoken a word directly to my mom or Addison since I walked out of that house, apart from that one group text. Every attempt to reach me has just been more abuse, more demands, more attempts to make me feel guilty. It took weeks of constant stress for me to finally see things clearly. This wasn't just a one-off, crazy demand. This was how they saw me, as a resource, not a person. Their sense of entitlement was so massive they couldn't even see how insane their request was. The fact that they were living rent-free in a house I co-owned while demanding my personal apartment. That was the point where something snapped in me. So, after all this, I made a big decision. Their behavior forced my hand. I want to see a lawyer last week. I found one who specializes in property disputes and laid out the entire story. I showed him a copy of Grandma's will and the deed to her house. He confirmed that Addison and I each own 50% of the house. There are no conditions in the will giving my mom a right to live there or anything like that. The lawyer explained a partition sale. If co-owners can't agree on what to do with a property, one can ask a judge to order it sold, and the proceeds get split. He said it's a common solution in cases like this. So that's what I'm doing. I've instructed my lawyer to start the process to force the sale of Grandma's house. If Addison, my mom, and Walt want to stay there, Addison will have to buy out my share at fair market value. We checked comps, and the house is worth around $350,000 to $400,000. My half would be $175,000 to $200,000. Given their financial situation, especially with Walt not working consistently, I doubt Addison can come up with that money. So, the house will likely go on the market, and Addison and I will each get our share of the cash. This means my mom, Addison, and Walt will have to move. And it means any relationship I thought I had with them is probably over. I'm also planning to keep the no-contact rule permanent with all of them, including the extended family who joined in to harass me. I'm laying it all out here because I need to get it off my chest. I guess I want to know, am I going too far? Update. It's been 2 months since my original post. First, thank you to everyone who commented and messaged me. I read every word. Honestly, I was expecting a lot more people to tell me I was in the wrong, but I'm stopping this now. Update 2, it's now been 10 months since I wrote that first post asking if I was wrong. It's been about 8 months since my first update when the legal process was just getting started. It feels like a lifetime ago. In some ways, the legal stuff with the house sale took a lot longer than I thought it would, but it's finally over during these past 10 months. Life otherwise has just been work. Trying to focus on my job, keeping my head down. I did get a small promotion at work, which was a nice bit of good news. In the middle of all this stress, the court did eventually order the partition sale of Grandma's house. It wasn't a quick process. Addison's legal aid lawyer tried everything they could to slow it down. They filed motions, asked for extensions. They argued that Addison should be allowed to stay in the house because she was a new mother. She had the baby during this period and had limited income. They painted me as the wealthy, heartless brother trying to evict a struggling sister and her newborn. My lawyer had to respond to all of this, explaining that I was simply exercising my legal right as a co-owner and that the situation was precipitated by their initial unreasonable demands. There were a couple of short court hearings that my lawyer attended on my behalf. I didn't have to go, which I was grateful for. The judge ultimately agreed that the law was clear. The property had to be sold and the proceeds divided. Since we couldn't agree, the court then appointed a neutral real estate agent to handle the sale. This was to make sure it was all done fairly and at arm's length. Getting the house actually listed took another couple of months. My mother and sister were predictably not very cooperative with the agent. The agent told my lawyer they made it difficult to schedule viewings. Sometimes they wouldn't answer the door or the house would be a mess when potential buyers came by. Lawyer had to send another formal letter to Addison's lawyer warning them that if they kept obstructing the sale, we would ask the court to intervene further and they could be held responsible for any extra costs or delays. That seemed to work a bit. They became more compliant, but I'm sure they weren't happy. The house was officially on the market for about 3 months. It got a decent amount of interest. It finally sold for $380,000. This was a good price, right in the middle of the range we expected. After all the costs were paid, the real estate agent's commission, legal fees for the sale itself, and some other standard closing costs, the total amount left to be split between me and Addison was about $345,000. So my 50% share came to $172,500. Addison got the exact same amount. The money was wired into my bank account last week. Seeing that transfer come through was a strange feeling, relief. Mostly my mother, Addison, Walt, and the baby, it's a boy. I found out indirectly had to be out of the house before the sale. Closed. A real estate agent did a final walkthrough. She said they left it reasonably clean, no major damage, which was one of my worries. Apparently, it was very cluttered and they took right up until the last possible day to move all their things out. I can only imagine how stressful that must have been for them. But they had months of notice that this was coming. My life now I'm still in my apartment. Of course, it feels even more like my sanctuary now. That $172,500 from the sale is sitting in a high-interest savings account while I decide what to do with it. Maybe invest it or use it as a down payment on a small rental property in the future. For now, just knowing it's there and that the financial link to my family is completely cut is a huge relief. I sleep better. I'm less stressed at work. My mother's situation, I don't have any direct contact with anyone, but I've heard little bits of information through the grapevine, mainly a distant cousin who is more neutral and occasionally posts vague things on social media that seem to allude to the situation. It seems my mother moved in with one of her sisters, my Aunt Carol. From what I gather, it's a very temporary thing, and Aunt Carol's house is small, so it's already causing some friction. Their mom is reportedly very bitter. She's telling everyone who will listen that I'm a monster who made my own family homeless for money. Addison and Walt's situation with her $172,500 Addison. And Walt apparently rented a small apartment. It's in a town about an hour's drive from the city where rents are cheaper. I don't know any specifics beyond that money is a lot for them. If they are smart, it could be a down payment on their own small house or at least give them a good cushion. But knowing Walt's track record with work and their past requests for money from me, I have my doubts about how long it will last them. Addison has her baby. Now I have no idea if Walt ever got that stable job he was supposedly looking for. I am an uncle, but I've never seen my nephew. That's a strange thought. Extended family, most of the relatives who call me to tell me how selfish I was have gone completely silent. No apologies, nothing. A couple of my younger cousins who I was closer to when we were kids did reach out to me individually a few months ago. They said they'd heard more details. I think one of them might have seen my original anonymous post, or someone shared it. They were much more understanding, even a bit sympathetic. I was polite, but I kept the conversations brief and didn't encourage more contact. The trust is gone. No contact maintained. I have had zero direct contact with my mother or sister since before the court proceedings really got going. They haven't tried to call or message me in months. I think they finally understood it was pointless, or their lawyers told them to stop. It's just silence. And honestly, the silence is peaceful. The sale of Grandma's house is definitely the end of this whole ugly story. It was a difficult, draining, and really sad process from start to finish. It made me see my family, especially my mother and sister, in a completely different light, and not a good one. It finalized the fact that we don't really have a relationship anymore. I'm done with this. Here's the second update. It's been 10 months since I first asked if I was wrong. About 8 months since the legal stuff started. Feels like a lifetime ago. The legal battle over the house sale dragged on way longer than I expected, but it's finally over. During these 10 months, life has been all about work. I've been keeping my head down, focusing on my job. I did get a small promotion, which is a nice silver lining amidst all the stress. Eventually, the court ordered the sale of Grandma's house. It wasn't quick. Addison's legal aid lawyer tried everything to slow it down. Motions, extensions, arguments that she should be allowed to stay in the house because she was a new mom with limited income. She had the baby during all this. They tried to paint me as the wealthy, heartless brother forcing out a struggling sister and her newborn. My lawyer had to counter all of it, explaining I was just exercising my legal right as a co-owner and that this situation was triggered by their unreasonable demands. There were a couple of brief court hearings that my lawyer attended on my behalf. Thankfully, the judge eventually ruled that the law was clear. The house had to be sold and the proceeds divided. The court appointed a neutral real estate agent to handle the sale to keep it fair. Getting the house listed took a couple more months. Predictably, my mom and Addison weren't very cooperative. The agent told my lawyer they made it difficult to schedule viewings. Sometimes they wouldn't answer the door, or the house would be a mess when buyers came through. My lawyer had to send another formal letter to Addison's lawyer, warning that if they kept obstructing the sale, we'd ask the court to step in and hold them responsible for extra costs or delays. That seemed to work, somewhat. They became more compliant, but clearly weren't happy. The house was on the market for about 3 months. It got decent interest and eventually sold for $380,000, a fair price right in the expected range. After all the costs, the agent's commission, legal fees, and closing costs, the remaining amount to be split was about $345,000. My share came to $172,500. Addison got the same amount. The money was wired to my account last week. Seeing that transfer was surreal. Mostly, it felt like relief. My mother, Addison, Walt, and their baby, a boy as I found out indirectly, had to be out of the house before the sale closed. The real estate agent did a final walkthrough and said they left it reasonably clean with no major damage, which had been a concern. Apparently, they took right up until the last possible day to move out. Must have been stressful for them, but they had plenty of notice. As for me, I'm still in my apartment. It feels even more like a sanctuary now. That $172,500 is sitting in a high-interest savings account while I decide what to do with it. Maybe invest or use it as a down payment on a small rental property someday. For now, just knowing it's there and that I'm financially unlinked from my family is a massive relief. I sleep better. I'm less stressed at work. I have no direct contact with anyone in the family. What little I hear comes from a distant cousin who posts vague stuff on social media. From what I gather, Mom moved in with Aunt Carol temporarily, but it's already causing friction because Carol's house is tiny. Mom's reportedly telling everyone I'm a monster who made my own family homeless for money. Addison and Walt apparently rented a small apartment about an hour outside the city, where rent's cheaper. That $172,500 is a lot for them. If they're smart, they could use it for a down payment on a small house or just as a cushion. But given Walt's track record with work and their past requests for money from me, I doubt it'll last them long. Addison had the baby, so I'm officially an uncle, but I've never met my nephew. That's a weird thought. Extended family? The ones who call me selfish and heartless have gone radio silent. No apologies. Nothing. A couple of younger cousins who I was close to as a kid reached out a few months ago. They'd heard more details, maybe even saw my original anonymous post. They were more sympathetic, but I kept the conversations brief. The trust is gone. I still haven't had any direct contact with Mom or Addison since before the legal process started. They haven't tried to call or message me in months. Maybe they finally got the hint, or maybe their lawyers told them to back off. Either way, it's been complete silence, and honestly, that silence is peaceful. Selling Grandma's house was the end of a really ugly chapter. The whole ordeal was draining and sad, but it made me see my family, especially my mom and sister, in a completely different light. Not a good one. And now, there's nothing left connecting us.